Hello, everybody. So this course is distilled down from a course I give at Stanford over 3 weeks. Sometimes I do a 3-hour workshop. I got 20 minutes. So this is going to be a lot of information, but you guys are very smart, and this is WarmGun, so what the hell? Let's do it. So we are going to talk about how products change our behavior and form habits. And when I meet with my clients or when I give these presentations, I oftentimes meet with the product builders, the engineers, the designers, the people who are actually making these products, and I constantly hear people referring to kind of the best of breed, the most highly addictive, the most habit-forming products out there. And these products, it turns out, tend to follow common patterns. They almost always start out as toys, nice-to-haves, features, for example, of another product. And then within the blink of an eye, these toys are touching hundreds of millions of users, and many of them are making hundreds of millions of dollars. What companies come to mind? What do you think of? Snapchat, yeah. Just had a $850 million valuation, and now that turned out that was cheap because Facebook offered them $3 billion. What else? Twitter, yeah. Had a huge IPO. First time you saw Twitter, okay, it was cute. It was nice. What else? Big one. Facebook, of course, right? The first time you saw Facebook, did you think it would really be Facebook, or did you think maybe it was a nicer MySpace or Friendster? So what we're going to talk about are patterns that we find time and time again inside these habit-forming technologies. And we're going to start with a question that I asked myself when I started this study, this exploration of habit-forming technologies. The question was a question that I was constantly asked when I was raising money on Sand Hill Road from my last company. The question was always, look, is this product a vitamin or a painkiller? Vitamin or a painkiller? Because investors, whether it's internal stakeholders in your company or VCs, backers of a product or a feature, they only want to invest in painkillers, right? Stop the customer's pain, hear what they need, and address that pain point. It's eminently quantifiable and monetizable markets, right? However, vitamins, vitamins are nice-to-haves. Vitamins are things like Fred Flintstone over there. We don't know if he's actually doing his job, but it feels emotionally good to know that we're doing something about our health, right? So these companies that you just mentioned a minute ago, the Twitters and the Pinterests and the Facebooks and Instagram, Snapchat, what are they? Are they vitamins or are they painkillers? How many of you think they're vitamins? How many of you think they're painkillers? Okay, so okay, a few of you think they're painkillers. Well, before you make up your mind, let me posit this thought. That a habit is when not doing something causes you a bit of pain. A habit is when not doing something causes a bit of pain. Because what we find with habit-forming technologies is that they all start as vitamins. They start as vitamins, catering to a pleasure-seeking behavior, and they become pain alleviators. They identify the need, sometimes create the need, and provide the remedy. Just to be clear here, let's talk about what I mean by pain. It's not exactly this kind of pain. It's more of a psychological pain. Let me help you experience this pain for just a second. If you would, close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to imagine that you have just received a message in whatever medium it is that you use when someone important needs to contact you. An email, an SMS, maybe a Facebook message, whatever it is that you use when people need to contact you. And now, I want you to bring awareness to your body. Think about how you feel right now. Okay? And now go ahead and open your eyes and tell me how you felt. Just shout it out. How'd you feel? Good? Okay, that's okay. What else? Anxious. Number one response when I do this study, that's almost always the first response, except for the guy who just said good, almost always anxiety. What else? Apprehension. Okay, what else? Shout it out. Nervous. A lot of people feel stress. Anybody feel a little bit of anxiety right here in the solar plexus, a little bit of tension? It's a very common response. So what you just experienced was the itch. That itch, it's not so much pain, it's a psychological itch that occurred from a stimulus. Right? It was a physiological response to a psychological stimulus. There was no message. I made it up. Right? But your body changed. You physically felt something in response to that emotion. And so the solutions that we seek for that discomfort to address the itch, in large part, forms our habits, and particularly our technology habits. Now, what we're not speaking of is addiction. There's something different between addictions and habits. Addictions are persistent compulsions or dependencies on a behavior or substance. Addiction is always self-defeating. We don't want to create addictive products. However, the same neural pathways, the same functions, the same patterns can be found when we build something good, which are habits. Habits, we can have good habits and we can have bad habits. Because all habits are behaviors that we do with little or no conscious thought. Taking out your phone instantly without really thinking about why you're taking it out and using an app, these behaviors occur unprompted. Right? We do them all day without really thinking. And the reason I'm so excited about teaching habit-forming technology is because there's a whole explosion of companies that are using habits for good, helping people live healthier, happier, more connected, richer lives by creating habits. Okay? Not only are habits very good for our customers, they're also very good for our bottom lines. Habits increase defensibility, they increase viral cycle time. There's all kinds of good things when it comes to the bottom line from having high engagement products. So if your business model requires habits, requires unprompted user engagement, and by the way, not every business model does. There are plenty of business models that can drive users through SEM, through other advertising. Not every business has to use habits, but if your business model does, just like those big businesses we discussed before, what I'm going to share with you is a design pattern to help you form better product hypotheses. I'm going to share a pattern with you to help you come up with the next feature in your product to make it more habit-forming. Because you've all been lean startup to death by now, right? You know the 3 steps of the lean startup of build, measure, learn, right? What's the most expensive part of build, measure, learn? Where does the money, the time, the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears all go? What phase? The building phase. Of course, it's the building phase. That's the most expensive part. So if we can build smarter, if we can look to the principles of consumer psychology to understand the things the users want but can't necessarily tell us, we can increase our odds of success. Okay? And these can make the difference between success and failure. So, we still with me? Excited to see the pattern? Good. The pattern that I'm going to share with you is called the hook model. The hook model is very simply an experience designed to connect your user's problem with your solution with enough frequency to form a habit. That's it. Experience designed to connect your solution to the user's problem with enough frequency to form a habit. And these hooks have 4 steps: a trigger, an action, a reward, and an investment. And you'll see them time and time again in the products that you find most engaging and most habit-forming. And there's a little acronym here I like to use. How many of you, by the way, had Ataris growing up? OK, a lot of you. Good, this is my generation. Sometimes when I teach this class, kids are like, I don't know what that is. But anyway, you know what this is. So I use this as an acronym so that you can remember a hook has 4 parts: a trigger, an action, a reward, and an investment. And as we all know, if you can make an acronym out of something, it has to be true, right? So let's start with triggers. The first step of connecting your user's problem to your solution with enough frequency to form a habit is figuring out your triggers. What we need to know about habit formation in the products that you build is that habits aren't created, right? You can't just pull them out of thin air. They're built upon, like the layers of a pearl. So a pearl is formed inside an oyster, a tiny grain of sand, where the oyster deposits layer upon layer of this nacre called mother of pearl until the pearl is formed. These foundations are triggers. Okay? To build an existing behavior, we have to do one behavior on top of another, on top of another. That's how new habits and new behaviors get formed. And these triggers come in 2 flavors, 2 types. We have external triggers and internal triggers. Okay? External triggers, you're all very, very familiar with. These are calls to action. These are cues, things that tell you what to do next, where the information for what to do next is in the trigger itself. Okay? A login now button, an alarm, an authority figure, somebody telling you what to do next are external triggers. You all know these, right? Because really, this field optimizing external triggers is called growth hacking, right? We know all about growth hacking and external triggers. But what product designers don't think about enough is the other type of trigger, the internal triggers. Internal triggers are things where the information for what to do next is an association in the user's mind. So emotions, routines, situations, places, these things don't tell us what to do, and yet we respond to them with an action just as reliably. Okay? So what we do when we're lonesome, indecisive, bored, powerless, lost, what we do in response to these emotions can activate our next action, can activate our habits. Part of the reason we know this is true is that we know that people with signs of pre-depression use the internet differently. They check email more. So one time I gave this presentation and somebody shouted out, yeah, it's because email makes us depressed, which I could kind of buy that, but actually what the study found was that people with clinical depression feel what psychologists call negative valence states. They feel down more frequently than the rest of the population. Okay? And so we know that they use the internet differently than other people because they're seeking a lift. They're seeking something to be taken out of that state. And think about your own habits. What do we do when we feel lonely? What technology do we use? Facebook, of course. When we're feeling unsure about pretty much anything, we go ahead and, that's right, we use Google, of course. And of course, when we're bored, maybe it's 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're at work, and we really are kind of, would prefer to do something else. That's a great time to go ahead and check Angry Birds, Reddit, YouTube. Boredom is a big, big internal trigger. There's lots of products that cater to boredom. So what do we do with this? It's a bit of pop psychology. How do we build for this? We build for this by fundamentally understanding our users' internal triggers. Okay? We have to understand what's the itch that they're coming to scratch with our product. Not just in terms of functional reasons, but emotional reasons. Let's take a look at Instagram real quick. 12 people, 13 people built Instagram, sold to Facebook for $1 billion. What made it so habit-forming? What are some of the things that they did correctly? They did a lot of things correctly. One thing I think they did particularly well was figure out their internal triggers. But let's start with external triggers. How did most people find out about Instagram? What channels did they use? Facebook, right? Facebook and Twitter, they had a call to action that said, go to Instagram, get your own, right? Post images like this yourself. Who here uses Instagram, by the way? Anybody here? You do? What's your name?
Missy.
Missy. Hi, nice to meet you. So Missy, what was the last thing you took a picture of with Instagram, if it's suitable for work?
I don't remember.
Can anybody else remember the last thing they took a picture of? Yeah?
A slide of Tom Hanks at the end of the...
Excellent. You took a slide of my stuff. And what's your name?
Julio.
Julio. So my slides didn't say, Julio, take a picture of me with Instagram. Right? There was no call to action there. But Julio had a reaction to say, oh, if I want to capture that, if I want to hold on to that slide, that moment, Instagram is my solution. There was an association in Julio's head that that was the solution to his problem. Okay? Instagram solved the pain of losing the moment. By the way, this talk of a moment, who used to own the moment 30 years ago? Kodak, right? The Kodak moment. Kodak, though, spent billions of dollars in about 100 years teaching users about the moment. And of course, Instagram had all of us teach other people about capturing the moment. But of course, Instagram is much more than just a way to capture photos. It doesn't just alleviate that itch. It's also a social network, right? So the more we use Instagram, the more we use it to relieve stress, loneliness, fear of missing out. We're using it for other reasons. It's not just a photo capturing app, right? There's lots of other things they did really well too, but particularly they did what I think is kind of a new paradigm, which is not only product market fit, but product moment fit. Identifying that time and place when your customer would want to use your product. Very, very important. So the next step of the hook, after triggers, is the action phase. The action phase is really defined as the simplest action, the simplest singular behavior, hopefully singular behavior, in anticipation of a reward. Okay, the simplest behavior in anticipation of reward. Let me show you how simple I mean by simple. Something as simple as scrolling on Pinterest. Just that act of scrolling. Searching on Google. Pushing the play button on YouTube. Something as simple as that singular, solitary behavior. It turns out that there's a formula for these singular actions, for these singular behaviors. And according to Dr. B.J. Fogg, who runs the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford, it can be summarized by this equation. It's not really math. It's more hypothetical here. But B.J. Fogg posits that for any singular behavior, represented by B, you need three things: sufficient motivation, ability, and a trigger. Okay? Sufficient motivation, ability, and a trigger at the same time for any behavior to occur. So let's start with these things. We already talked about triggers. Let's talk about motivation. Motivation, according to Edward Deci, the founder of self-determination theory, is simply the energy for action, how much we want to do something. And according to psychologists, they've been debating the nature of motivation forever now, but B.J. Fogg posits these 6 levers, these 6 things that we can pull to increase or decrease motivation. And they are that we all seek pleasure and avoid pain, we seek hope and avoid fear, we seek social acceptance, and we avoid social rejection. So these are 6 things that we see time and time again used to increase or decrease motivation. So let's take a quick pop quiz here. Okay? I'm going to show you some ads. The advertising industry is all about increasing and decreasing motivation for action. You tell me what motivator is being used. Okay? The first one's a freebie. Pretty obvious, right? So seeking hope, right? Not only is the word written across the ad, but even if you were just to look at the president, what's he looking towards? Exactly, hope for the future. Here's another one. What's the motivator? What's being sold is hamburgers, but the motivator, seeking pleasure. Exactly. So the target demographic for these hamburger ads are teenage boys. And for teenage boys, sex is a highly salient motivator associated with pleasure. Now, for other demographics, this doesn't motivate them at all. As the father of a 5-year-old girl, this doesn't do it for me, right? I'm not the target demographic anymore. But for some people, this is highly motivating. Here's another one. What's the motivator? Social acceptance. Exactly. I'm having a beer with my buds. Okay? Social acceptance. Exactly. Here's another one. So this is an ad for wearing motorcycle helmets. It says, I won't wear a helmet because it makes me look stupid. And the guy has a large scar on his head. What's the motivator? Fear. Fear. Exactly. Avoiding fear. So those are the factors of motivation, the 6 things that we can use to motivate people to take action. Next is ability. So out of B equals MAT, we did motivation and triggers. This is ability. Ability is all about the capacity to do something, how easy or difficult something is to do. And here again, we have 6 levers, another 6 levers. How much time something takes, how much money, how much physical effort. A big one in our industry, cognitive cycles, brain cycles, right? How difficult something is to understand makes it more or less likely the behavior will occur. Social deviance, how different is it from anything I've seen anyone else do? And then finally, non-routine. And this is where habits get really interesting. Habits have a repeater effect. The more we do a particular behavior, the more we become familiar with it, the more likely it is we'll do it in the future. Okay? It's called practice. So what does this mean for you as engineers, as designers and builders? It means that oftentimes we need to be careful because novelty can be a liability. If something is too new, if something is too outside the norm, it decreases the likelihood of that intended behavior. So novelty can be a liability. And here's how this all fits together. And I think this is a practical tool that you can use inside your organizations. When you think about a singular behavior, when you think about an action occurring, you can ask yourself, do we have sufficient motivation? Do we have sufficient ability? Sorry if you can't see in the back. There's an ability line on the back, on the bottom. And if we have sufficient motivation and sufficient ability, do we cross into this red zone where a behavior occurs? Okay? So let's make this concrete. Let's say a phone rings. Phone rings in your life, and you don't pick it up. Give me a reason why you didn't pick it up.
It's my boss.
That's why you don't pick it up. OK, so maybe you're not good friends with your boss. Your motivation is too low. The phone's right there in front of you. You heard it ring, but you don't want to pick it up. Your motivation is too low. What's another reason?
Didn't recognize the phone number.
OK, so that might be motivation as well. What's another reason with ability or trigger? What's that? Too busy? Maybe you're in a seminar like this. You're watching me talk. Your phone rings, and you really want to pick it up. You heard it ring, but it's too socially awkward to pick it up, right? It's too difficult to go out of the room and pick it up, so you don't. What's one more reason with triggers? What, you don't hear it. Exactly. You don't hear the trigger. So if no trigger is present. So we have to have all 3 things at the same time. Sufficient motivation. The behavior has to be easy enough to do. And a trigger must be present in any singular solitary behavior. So simplicity, when it comes to making things easier to do, it's all about finding the scarcest resource at that moment. What is your user missing? Are they missing the time, the money, does it take too much physical effort, too much cognitive load? Is it too outside the norm? They've never seen anyone else do it. or is it too new? Okay? It's non-routine. So let's take a look here at Twitter over the years and see how they've used these principles of motivation, ability, and triggers. Here's Twitter in 2009, Twitter in 2010, and here's Twitter today. What's changed? What do you see as changed over the years?
Less description.
A lot less description, right? Just a lot less words. And look at the intended behavior. What do they want people to do on this landing page today? Sign in or sign up. That's it. But back in 2009, you could hit what, why, how, watch video, click here, click there. There's a lot more to do, a lot more cognitive load distracting from the intended behavior. Now, of course, Twitter is in a different place today than they were in 2009. But the fact holds that all this cognitive load, all this work they asked the user to do, hurt them. It distracted from the intended behavior of signing in or signing up. Okay? So that's the trigger phase. I'm sorry, that's the action phase. So we've recognized the user's itch. That's the trigger phase. The action is the simplest behavior in anticipation of reward. And now it's time for the reward itself, scratching the user's itch. So when it comes to talking about reward, we need to start in the user's brain. And in particular, an area of the brain called the nucleus accumbens that sits right in between the center of your ears. And the research around the nucleus accumbens was first done by two researchers by the name of Olds and Milner, who discovered when they allowed lab animals to self-stimulate this part of the brain by sending a tiny electrical current, they wanted nothing else. They repeated these experiments with people, and the same thing occurred. They would want nothing but to continue to stimulate this part of the brain. So Olds and Milner thought, hey, we must have discovered the brain's pleasure center. Why else would people do so incessantly? Why would they continue to stimulate this part of the brain? They would forego food, water, everything just to continue to stimulate. We also know that other things stimulate the nucleus accumbens. So things like a good deal, sex, junk food, certain chemicals like nicotine, and of course in the middle, technology, all stimulate this area of the brain. Olds and Milner thought, aha, we have discovered the brain's pleasure center. But it turns out that wasn't exactly true. It wasn't really the pleasure center. What they were stimulating was the stress of desire. The stress of desire. Because it turns out that the nucleus accumbens, the part that becomes most active, becomes active not when the reward is achieved, but in anticipation of the reward. And when the reward is achieved, when the outcome is attained, that area of the brain quells. So it turns out that this area of the brain that these test subjects found so enticing was about the anticipation of the outcome, not the outcome itself. When we have that itch, we seek to scratch it. And that nucleus accumbens is what creates that itch, this anticipatory response, the stress of desire. Turns out there's also a way to supercharge that stress of desire. Anybody want to know how? Anybody curious? Exactly. The unknown is fascinating. So variability increases our focus and increases our engagement. And of course, this research comes out of the work of B.F. Skinner, who found that when he gave pigeons, lab pigeons, a variable reward, when the rewards came on a variable cycle, so one time the pigeon would click a lever and nothing would come out, the next time the pigeon would click the lever, something would come out. When there was variability, when there was mystery, the rate of response increased. The pigeon would click more frequently. So we know that the nucleus accumbens is stimulated, that dopamine increases with variability. And these types of rewards, these variable rewards come in three types. Rewards of the tribe, hunt, and self. And as you leave here today, you're going to start seeing in the world around you the products that are most engaging, that are most habit-forming, have one or more of these variable reward types. So rewards of the tribe, the search for social rewards, of course, these are things like empathetic joy, partnership, competition, cooperation, things that feel good from other people. Great example of this, of course, is on social media. Mark Zuckerberg gets married, and 1.3 million people like it. Think about all the variability on social media. What are people going to post? How many people are going to like it? What are they going to say? Lots and lots of variability associated with social media. Stack Overflow, another great example, right? People spend tons of time on Stack Overflow. 5,000 questions every single day get answered on Stack Overflow. Why? Well, because every time I post something on Stack Overflow, there's this variability of how many people will upvote it. Might they downvote it? What might people say about it? And I earn status, I earn points and badges based on my tribe, based on people whose opinions I care about. Okay? Next is the rewards of the hunt, the search for resources. The search for resources stems from our primal desire for food. Food gets translated into money, and then, of course, in modern society, information. So everybody thinks of Las Vegas and slot machines when it comes to variable rewards, but what they might not think about is the feed. Right? Why is the feed such a common element of so many products today? Well, think about it, right? The first one's not interesting, the second one's not interesting. Oh, but the third one, that's interesting. And so if I want more rewards, all I got to do is this, right? Just keep scrolling. So this becomes very similar to this, both variable rewards of information, of the hunt. If you want to look at the masters of this, check out Pinterest, where I dare you not to scroll. And this is a comic I pulled from a Pinterest page where it has a guy hunched over his screen. And he says, scroll, 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 scroll. And then he says, ha, 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 and then scroll, scroll, scroll. That's exactly the behavior. Searching and never done searching. That's what variable rewards are all about in these experiences. Finally, the rewards of the self. So this is about the search for self-achievement. So things like gameplay. So the search for mastery, consistency, completion, leveling up to the next challenge is all about rewards of the self. And if you say to yourself, you know what, I'm not really much of a gamer, that's not for me, I bet you play this game every day. Oops, that game, every day. Checking email by checking that last unread message, finishing your to-do list. All these are about the variable rewards of mastery and completion and competency. A word of warning, though, before you say, great, we're going to make our product more habit-forming by layering on variable rewards, you still have to address the customer's itch. Okay? Variable rewards are not a free pass. So finally, before I wrap up here, the investment phase. So we figured out the user's itch, the simplest action before a reward. We've given them the reward itself, given them what they came for, but leaving them wanting more. And then finally, the investment phase. The investment phase is the most neglected phase of the hook that I see time and time again. And the investment phase is really about where the user puts something into the product of value. Why? To make it better, to make it more likely that they'll pass through the hook again. It can be time, money, personal data, effort, something that increases the likelihood of the next pass through the hook. And investment increases the likelihood of the next pass in two ways. The first way is by loading the next trigger. Loading the next trigger makes the next pass through the hook more likely. For example, on MessageMe, when I write someone back, there's no immediate rewards. I don't get stickers and points or anything. It's an anticipation of future rewards where I load the next trigger when someone replies to me. Okay? Refresh. Does anybody use Refresh in here? Full disclosure, I worked with them for about a year and a half. This is an app that tells you about your next meeting, some information about your next meeting. And when you connect the app to your calendar, to your social network, it pings you right before you're about to meet that person, 15 minutes before. They load the next trigger. And then finally, take a look at the Pinterest Pin It button. Right? Every time I put that Pin It button on my Chrome and I see it and I want to capture something, I want to save something, right? That same need to capture, there's my external trigger. The second way that investments increase the likelihood of the next pass is by storing value. By storing value. So things like putting content into a system, like on iTunes, data, like on a personal finance software like Mint, followers. The more followers I have, the more valuable the service becomes to me. And then finally, reputation. So I can literally take my reputation to the bank with services like TaskRabbit or eBay or Airbnb. I can literally charge more for my products and services. And all these forms of stored value increase the likelihood that I'll keep using the service. Okay? Let me skip ahead here because we're running a little low on time. So in summary here, the hook is very simply an experience designed to connect the user's problem to your solution with enough frequency to form a habit, and that over time, these hooks form these habits. These form associations with users' internal triggers. So you can ask yourself, you can take this canvas to use with your products. You can ask yourself, what internal trigger is your product addressing? What brings your users to your solution? Is the reward, the action phase, what's the simplest behavior done in anticipation of reward? Number 4, is your reward fulfilling and yet leaves the user wanting more? And then finally, what's the bit of work done to increase the likelihood of the next pass through the hook? Okay? So, quick question before I go. Many of you are giggling a little bit because you're asking yourself, well, is this okay? Is this moral? Is this right to do, to manipulate people? And let's face it, a lot of design is about manipulation. So how do we weigh that? How do we think about how we use these principles? Because let's be honest, many of these principles that I've shared with you today have been used for many years for time-wasting purposes or even nefarious purposes. So what I ask you to do, what I challenge you to do, is to think about how you can use these tactics responsibly. How can you help people live better, healthier, more productive, more connected lives, and use habits for good? And to end on the words of Gandhi, to use his phrase a bit, I encourage you to build the change that you wish to see in the world. Thank you very much. I'd love to give you the slides, so if you can you put that back up? Yeah, loading. Oh, OK. She's going to put up a URL. It's opinion2.us. It's a very, very short 5-question survey. If you can go to that URL, opinion2.us, not .com. And you'll get this, you'll be taken straight to my SlideShare page where you'll get all these slides that you just saw. Thank you again.